Some people are born into privilege, others live in the shadows, invisible to a world that moves too fast to notice their potential. This is the story of an unlikely encounter that defied expectations and transformed two lives forever. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The rain in San Francisco fell in sheets that Thursday evening, turning the city's steep streets into rushing rivers. Most pedestrians had disappeared, seeking shelter from the downpour, all except one man who stood motionless under the partial cover of an oak tree in Dolores Park, seemingly oblivious to the water soaking through his tattered coat. James Wilson hadn't always lived on the streets. The creases around his eyes hinted at the depth of a life once lived differently. His hands, despite the dirt embedded beneath his fingernails, moved with the precision of someone who once commanded respect. Tonight, those hands held a piece of discarded cardboard salvaged from a nearby dumpster, now softening in the rain as he scrawled across it with a stubby pencil. It wasn't the typical plea for help or money that many expected from someone in his position. Instead, the cardboard was covered in a complex mathematical equation, variables, constants, and notation that would have been at home on a university whiteboard, rather than in the trembling hands of a man who hadn't eaten properly in 3 days. 2 blocks away, Alexander Wright was cursing himself for declining his driver's offer to pick him up after the board meeting ran late. The tech CEO pulled his designer coat tighter as he hurried through the rain, the glow of his smartphone illuminating his frustrated expression. The quarterly numbers weren't just disappointing, they were potentially catastrophic for the artificial intelligence platform his company had spent 4 years developing. "We need a breakthrough," his CTO had said just hours earlier, "or we might as well close up shop by summer." Alex's mind raced with possibilities, all insufficient, as he cut through Dolores Park to shorten his route home. That's when he saw him, a figure hunched under a tree, oddly still despite the weather. Alex would have continued past without a second glance, had it not been for a sudden flash of lightning that illuminated the park for a brief moment. In that flash, Alex caught sight of the equations on the cardboard. He stopped abruptly, rain streaming down his face, attention suddenly and completely captured by what he'd glimpsed. "Excuse me," Alex called out, approaching cautiously. James didn't look up, his pencil continuing its dance across the sodden cardboard. "That equation, are you working on a neural network optimization problem?" James paused then, his movements freezing, as if someone had hit pause on a video. Slowly he raised his head, revealing eyes that held an unexpected clarity despite his disheveled appearance. "It's not optimization," he replied, his voice hoarse from disuse. "It's transformation. Huge difference." Alex stepped closer, squinting through the rain at the notation. That looks like the foundation problem we've been stuck on for months," he murmured, more to himself than to James. "How did you... Been thinking about it for years," James cut in, shrugging as if discussing the weather rather than advanced mathematics. "Started back when I was at Stanford, before everything else." Alex's eyebrows shot up. "You were at Stanford?" James didn't answer, returning his attention to the equation. His pencil hovered over a sequence of variables, then scratched through a section before rewriting it. "The problem isn't in the approach," he said finally. "It's in the constraints. You're limiting the propagation." A knot formed in Alex's stomach, the kind that came from recognition of something monumental. Despite the rain, despite his soaked clothes, despite the improbability of the situation, Alex Wright made a decision that would alter the trajectory of both their lives. "I'll give you $500 if you'll come to my office right now and explain that to my team," he said, James's pencil stopped again. He looked up, studying Alex's face with an unexpected intensity. Why? Because I think you might have just solved a problem worth millions. A bitter laugh escaped James's lips. And you think 500 is fair? Alex considered this, then shook his head. No, you're right. 10,000 tonight, just to talk, through your approach. James carefully tucked the pencil behind his ear, a surprisingly professional gesture from a man living in a park. He folded the cardboard equation and slid it inside his coat. I don't need your charity, he said quietly. But I do need access to computational resources to prove this works. He stood up straight, and despite his ragged appearance, there was a sudden dignity in his bearing. 20% of whatever it generates in the first year. Alex blinked, momentarily stunned by the audacity. Then he laughed, the first genuine laugh he'd experienced in weeks of mounting corporate pressure. You're either insane or a genius. Most people can't tell the difference, James replied, without a hint of humor. Alex extended his hand. Let's find out which. Deal. The two men, separated by circumstance yet connected by an invisible thread of mathematical understanding, shook hands in the rain. Neither could have predicted what would unfold from this moment, a convergence of paths that had seemed irrevocably divergent. The Bay Area Institute of Technology loomed over the northern edge of the city, its modern glass buildings interspersed with century-old brick structures. Within its walls, some of the brightest minds in mathematics and computer science worked on problems that would shape the future of technology. And in a small office on the third floor of the mathematics building, Dr. Sarah Chen was packing up for the evening when her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Need your expertise. Bringing someone. Innovation Hall, 20 minutes. Alex Wright. Sarah frowned at her phone. She'd met the tech billionaire exactly once, at a fundraising gala where he'd donated a substantial sum to the Institute's research fund. They'd discussed her work in computational mathematics briefly, but certainly not enough to warrant an urgent late-night meeting. Still, curiosity won out. 30 minutes later, she sat across from two men in the otherwise empty conference room 17. Alex Wright, looking uncharacteristically disheveled, and a man she didn't recognize whose appearance suggested he lived on the streets. Between them on the polished conference table lay a rain-damaged piece of cardboard covered in mathematical notation. Dr. Chen, Alex began. This is James Wilson. He's been working on a mathematical approach to the transformation. Problem in neural networks, and I believe it might intersect with your research. Sarah raised an eyebrow, glancing between the cardboard and James, trying to mask her skepticism. Mr. Wright, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but I'm not sure what you're expecting me to... Just look at it, James interrupted quietly. The third line. Something in his tone, a certainty that bordered on impatience, made Sarah pause. She pulled the cardboard closer, examining the equation with a mathematician's precision. Her initial dismissal quickly gave way to concentration, then surprise, and finally a quiet reverence that only comes when witnessing something truly original. This isn't conventional, she murmured, tracing a finger along a sequence of variables. You're using a recursive pattern to create adaptive pathways instead of static optimization points. She looked up at James, truly seeing him for the first time. Where did you study? Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. A Stanford PhD program in applied mathematics, left in my final year. Why? The question escaped before Sarah could consider its propriety. James's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes seemed to retreat inward. Family, emergency, never made it back. Alex, who had been watching this exchange with growing interest, leaned forward. "Dr. Chen, do you think his approach could work?" Sarah took a moment before answering, her fingers still resting on the equation. "It's unorthodox, but yes, theoretically this could solve the transformation problem that's been bottlenecking AI development." She looked directly at James. "But you'd need computational resources to test it, and the mathematics would need to be translated into a viable algorithm." "That's where I come in," Alex said, his entrepreneurial excitement barely contained. "James and I have reached an arrangement. He's going to work with my team at Wright Technologies to implement this approach." He turned to James. "But we could use academic validation. Would you consider bringing Dr. Chen into the project as a consultant?" James didn't immediately respond. Instead, he reclaimed the cardboard, studying his own work as if seeing it through new eyes. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of someone who had lost and found himself countless times. "I've been invisible for 7 years," he said. "Working on this in my head, on scraps of paper, on the backs of discarded flyers, not because I believed it would change my situation, but because the math was the only thing that still made sense." He looked up, meeting Sarah's gaze. "Directly. If you can help prove this works, I'll tell you why it matters beyond making Mr. Wright here another $1 billion. Sarah found herself nodding, drawn in by the mystery as much as the mathematics. "I have graduate students who could help with the computational modeling," she offered. "We could start tomorrow." "No," James said firmly. "Tonight. I've waited long enough." And so at nearly midnight, in the Institute's computer lab, an unlikely trio began the work of translating a homeless man's equation into digital form. James navigated the programming environment with surprising fluency, his fingers moving across the keyboard with muscle memory that had survived years of disuse. Sarah observed his coding style, occasionally offering suggestions or asking questions that revealed a growing respect. Alex made calls, arranging resources and access that would normally have taken weeks to secure. By 3 a.m., they had a basic implementation ready for testing. James sat motionless as the algorithm ran, his eyes fixed on the screen, his expression unreadable. Sarah stood beside him, equally focused. Alex paced behind them, alternating between checking his phone and watching the progress indicators. When the results finally appeared, the room fell silent. The algorithm hadn't just worked, it had performed at an efficiency level that defied conventional expectations. "This changes everything," Sarah whispered. James closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, there was a mixture of vindication and sorrow in his gaze. "It should have changed everything years ago," he said quietly. "What do you mean?" Alex asked, moving closer. James hesitated, then reached into his coat and pulled out a worn leather wallet. From it, he extracted a faded photograph and placed it on the desk. It showed a younger, clean-shaven version of himself, standing next to a smiling young woman in graduation regalia. "My daughter, Emily," he explained. "Brilliant mathematician. She developed the core concept of this algorithm during her undergraduate research. She couldn't get anyone to take her seriously. Too young, too female, too unconventional in her thinking." His voice remained steady, but his fingers trembled slightly. "She died in a car accident before she could publish. I promised her I'd finish what she started." Sarah gently picked up the photograph. "I think I remember her name from citation indexes," she said softly. "Wilson. Emily Wilson. She published a preliminary paper on network adaptivity, didn't she? Around 2016, James nodded. "Her only published work. The foundation for everything else." Alex, who had been listening intently, sat down across from James. "So for 7 years, you've been trying to complete her work, while living on the streets?" "I lost everything after she died," James said, simply, My job, my home, my purpose. Her mathematics was all I had left. I couldn't let it disappear too. The weight of this revelation settled over the room. What had begun as a potential business opportunity had transformed into something far more profound. A father's promise, a daughter's legacy, a mathematical breakthrough born from loss and perseverance. "James," Alex said finally, "I want to change our arrangement." James tensed visibly. "We had a deal." "I know, but this is bigger than I realized." Alex leaned forward, his expression earnest. "I'm not just offering you a percentage anymore. I want to establish the Emily Wilson Foundation for Mathematical Innovation, with you as its director and this algorithm as its first project. Full credit to Emily as the originator and to you as the one who completed it." James stared at him, suspicion warring with hope. "Why would you do that?" "Because some things matter more than money," Alex replied, "and because I recognize that what you've done isn't just valuable, it's remarkable." Gee, he glanced at the computer screen where the results of their test still displayed. "Also, practically speaking, this approach is going to transform our entire industry. Being connected to its development and implementation is good business." Sarah, who had been quiet during this exchange, placed the photograph back on the desk. "The Institute would be honored to collaborate with such a foundation," she said. "We could provide academic resources, graduate student support, publication channels." James looked between them, then down at his daughter's smiling face in the photograph. For the first time that night, his composure cracked slightly. "She always said that mathematics was too important to be owned by any one person or company," he murmured, "that the best ideas should benefit everyone." "Then that's what we'll ensure happens," Alex promised. Outside, the rain had finally stopped. Dawn was breaking over San Francisco, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that reflected off the Institute's glass buildings. As light filled Conference Room 17, three people from vastly different worlds found themselves united by an equation written on a piece of soggy cardboard, an equation that would soon change not just their lives, but countless others. James carefully folded the photograph and returned it to his wallet. "If we're going to do this," he said, his voice finding new strength, "then we do it right. Emily's work deserves nothing less." The following week unfolded with dizzying speed. James, now installed in a suite at a nearby hotel, despite his protests about unnecessary luxury, worked closely with Sarah and a select team of graduate students to refine the algorithm. Alex cleared his schedule to oversee the project personally, much to the surprise of his executive team. Word spread quickly through the tech community that Wright Technologies was on the verge of a major breakthrough. Speculation ran rampant, stock prices fluctuated, and competitors scrambled to discover what Alex Wright had found that warranted his sudden and intense focus. Richard Blackwell, the longest-serving member of Wright Technologies' board of directors, demanded answers during an emergency board meeting. "You've essentially abandoned day-to-day operations," he said, his voice carrying across the executive boardroom. "All for some mysterious project based on an equation you found in a park. Alex, do you realize how that sounds?" Alex remained unperturbed. "It sounds implausible, I admit. But in 1 week, we'll be unveiling technology that will reposition Wright Technologies as the definitive leader in adaptive AI systems." "Based on a homeless man's scribblings," Richard replied, making no attempt to hide his disdain. "Based on breakthrough mathematics from Dr. Emily Wilson, posthumously completed by her father, James Wilson," Alex corrected firmly. "And yes, James has been homeless. He's also a former Stanford PhD candidate who sacrificed everything to fulfill a promise to his daughter." Richard shook his head. This sentimentality isn't like you, Alex. We built this company on pragmatism. Maybe that's been our limitation, Alex replied thoughtfully. Maybe we've been too focused on optimization when we should have been thinking about transformation. He smiled slightly at his choice of words, remembering James's correction. That first night in the rain, back at the Institute, James was experiencing his own form of resistance. Despite Sarah's endorsement, many faculty members viewed him with suspicion, a sentiment that intensified when they learned of his background. Academic credentials were currency in these halls, and James's incomplete PhD and years away from formal mathematics made him an outsider. One afternoon, James overheard two professors talking outside the computer lab where he'd been working. "It's a publicity stunt," one was saying. "Wright's using this homeless genius narrative for media. Attention before they launch whatever they've actually developed internally." "Undersay, Chen's risking her reputation," the other replied. "I don't know what Wright promised her, but associating the Institute with this charade is reckless." James had grown accustomed to being invisible, to being underestimated. But hearing his daughter's work dismissed as a charade ignited something within him that years on the street had nearly extinguished: pride. He stepped into the hallway facing the startled professors. "Gentlemen," he said calmly, "I understand your skepticism, but perhaps you'd care to review the preliminary papers we're preparing for publication. I'd welcome your mathematical critique, if not your personal judgments." The professors exchanged uncomfortable glances, caught between embarrassment at being overheard and persistent doubt. "That won't be necessary, Dr. Wilson," came Sarah's voice from behind them. She had emerged from her office in time to witness the confrontation. "Professor Keller here has already agreed to serve as an independent validator for our work, haven't you, Robert?" The older of the two professors looked surprised, then resigned. Yes, that's correct." "Excellent," Sarah continued smoothly. "James, why don't you show Professor Keller the latest iteration? I think he'll find the recursive patterns particularly interesting." The validation process that followed was rigorous, occasionally contentious, but ultimately transformative. Professor Keller, despite his initial skepticism, found himself increasingly impressed by the elegance of Emily's original concept and the thoroughness of James's implementation. By the end of the day, he was actively suggesting refinements and extensions to the work. That evening, Sarah found James sitting alone in conference room 17, staring at his daughter's photograph. "Professor Keller is already incorporating your approach into next semester's graduate seminar," she said, taking a seat across from him. "That's quite a turnaround from this afternoon." James nodded slightly. Emily would have loved that. She always said the best mathematics should be taught, not just published. He looked up at Sarah. "Thank you for believing before there was proof. Sometimes the most important discoveries require a leap of faith," she replied. "Besides, I recognize something in your equations, not just brilliance, but purpose." She hesitated, then asked the question that had been on her mind for days. "James, what happened after Emily died? How did you end up on the streets?" He finished for her. "It wasn't one thing, it was everything. Medical bills. Emily's treatment before the accident was experimental, not covered by insurance. Grief that made it impossible to focus on completing my degree or maintaining my research position. Mortgage payments I couldn't make after depleting my savings." He shrugged slightly. "The system doesn't allow much room for falling apart, even temporarily." Sarah nodded, understanding all too well how quickly security could unravel in academia. "And no one helped?" "People tried," James acknowledged. "But I wasn't interested in help. I was interested in finishing Emily's work. Everything else seemed irrelevant." He carefully returned the photograph to his wallet. Looking back, I can see I was punishing myself for surviving when she didn't, for not recognizing the importance of her work sooner when I might have helped her gain recognition while she was alive. The honesty of his response hung in the air between them. Sarah found herself wondering how many brilliant minds had been lost to circumstances, to poverty, to grief, to systems that valued credentials over contributions. "Well," she said finally, "Emily's work is about to change the world, and you've honored her in a way few fathers could." As they sat in comfortable silence, Alex arrived with Michael Roberts, his business partner and Wright Technologies CTO. The energy they brought into the room was palpable. "We're ready," Alex announced without preamble. "The integration tests are complete. The algorithm works seamlessly with our existing AI framework, with performance metrics that exceed our wildest projections." He looked directly at James. "The question is, are you ready for what comes next?" James considered this. "What exactly does next entail?" Michael stepped forward, extending his hand to James. "A press conference next Tuesday, the official announcement of the Emily Wilson Foundation, the unveiling of what we're calling Wilson Transformation Networks, and your introduction as the bridge between academic innovation and practical implementation." James hesitated. "I'm not presentable," he said quietly, gesturing to his borrowed clothes. "Clean, but clearly not his own." Alex smiled. "That's the least of our concerns. What matters is whether you're prepared for the attention, the questions, the sudden visibility, after years of being overlooked." "I've been preparing for 7 years," James replied, a newfound confidence in his voice. "Emily deserves this recognition. I'm just the messenger." As the group discussed logistics for the upcoming announcement, none of them noticed the young woman who had paused outside the conference room, her arms full of printouts. Olivia Martinez, a first-year graduate student assigned to Sarah's research team, had been delivering the latest simulation results when she overheard the conversation. Olivia had been the one to run many of the initial tests on James's algorithm. She had studied Emily Wilson's original paper as an undergraduate and had written her admission essay on the potential applications of Wilson's work if it had been fully developed. To her, this wasn't just an exciting project. It was the continuation of work by a woman who had inspired her own mathematical journey. Later that night, after everyone else had left, Olivia returned to the computer lab to find James still there, making adjustments to the code. She hesitated at the door, gathering her courage before speaking. "Mr. Wilson, I've been meaning to. I'll tell you, your daughter's paper changed my life." James looked up, surprised. "You've read Emily's work?" Olivia nodded eagerly. "In my undergraduate differential equations class, I even tried to extend some of her ideas for my senior thesis, but I didn't have the mathematical maturity to get very far." She approached his desk tentatively. "When Dr. Chen assigned me to this project, I didn't realize at first that it was connected to Emily Wilson's work. But once I saw the patterns, it was like finding a missing piece of a puzzle I'd been trying to solve for years." For the first time in days, James smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his weathered face. She would have liked that knowing her work inspired others. He gestured to the chair beside him. "Would you like to see what we're implementing next? It's based on her notebook entries that never made it into her published paper." As they worked into the early hours, James found himself explaining concepts not just as a mathematician, but as a father sharing his daughter's legacy. And Olivia listened with the reverence of someone witnessing history being reclaimed and reshaped before her eyes. In that quiet moment, a former homeless man and a young graduate student connected by equations and aspiration, the true power of James's journey began to reveal itself. This wasn't just about algorithmic innovation or corporate advancement. It wasn't even just about honoring Emily. It was about transformation in its most human form, the reconnection of a brilliant mind to a world that had nearly lost it forever. Outside, San Francisco continued its restless movement. Inside Conference Room 17, mathematics created a bridge across loss, across class divisions, across time itself, proving once again that the most profound equations are those that connect us despite all odds. The morning of the press conference arrived with an unusual fog that clung to San Francisco's skyscrapers like reluctant ghosts. James stood at the window of his hotel suite, watching the city emerge through wisps of gray. 7 days ago, he had been huddled under a tree in Dolores Park. Now he wore a tailored suit that felt both foreign and vaguely familiar, like a memory of someone he used to be. A gentle knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Michael Roberts entered, carrying a tablet and a coffee that he handed to James without ceremony. "Final run-through in 30 minutes, he said. "How are you feeling?" James took the coffee, grateful for its warmth. "Like an imposter," he admitted. "Not because of the mathematics, that's the only part that feels real. But this," he gestured to the suit, the luxury suite, "feels like I'm playing a role in someone else's story." Michael considered this with unexpected understanding. "Maybe we're all playing roles," he suggested. "Alex certainly is. The confident tech visionary who never doubts his decisions. That's as much costume as your suit." He set the tablet down and leaned against the desk. "For what it's worth, the preliminary market reaction to the rumors has been extraordinary. Our stock is up 17% since the announcement of a major innovation breakthrough." "Emily's breakthrough," James corrected quietly. "Yes," Michael agreed, "which is why we've invited 3 distinguished women mathematicians to join the panel today to emphasize that this isn't just about your redemption story or Alex's business acumen. It's about recognizing innovative thinking that was overlooked." James nodded, appreciating the gesture more than he could express. The past week had been a blur of code refinements, legal documents, and crash courses in corporate communications. Throughout it all, James had insisted on one unwavering principle. Emily must be credited as the originator of the core concepts. Alex, to his credit, had not only agreed, but had embraced this narrative, understanding that the human story behind the algorithm made it more compelling, not less. Across town at the Bay Area Institute of Technology, Sarah was facing her own pre-conference challenges. Dean Rodriguez had called her into his office, his expression grave. "I've received concerns from several department heads," he began, without preamble. "They're questioning the Institute's involvement in today's announcement. Specifically, they're concerned that we're lending our credibility to what might be perceived as a publicity stunt." Sarah had anticipated this resistance. "With respect, those concerns come from people who haven't reviewed the mathematics," she replied. "Professor Keller has thoroughly validated the work, as have 2 external reviewers. It's not the validity of the mathematics that concerns them," Rodriguez clarified. "It's the narrative. A homeless man completing his deceased daughter's work, suddenly discovered by a billionaire. It reads like a screenplay, not science." "Sometimes reality defies our expectations," Sarah said, maintaining her composure despite her growing frustration. "James Wilson was never just a homeless man. He was a mathematician who experienced profound loss and societal failure. The fact that his circumstance sounds improbable speaks more to our biases than to his credibility." Rodriguez sighed, rubbing his temples. "The board is particularly concerned about Olivia Martinez's involvement. She's a first-year graduate, student with no published work, yet she's been included in the press materials as a key team member." "Because she is one," Sarah insisted. Olivia recognized patterns in Emily Wilson's original paper that most of our faculty missed. Her insights have been invaluable to the implementation process. She leaned forward, her voice firm but passionate. Dean Rodriguez, if we claim to value innovation and diversity of thought, we cannot simultaneously insist that breakthrough ideas come only from established channels and expected sources. The tension between them was palpable, highlighting the fundamental conflict at play, not just at the Institute, but throughout the tech and academic worlds. The struggle between institutional validation and transformative innovation that often originated at the margins. Finally, Rodriguez nodded. You've made your position clear. The Institute will honor its commitment to today's event. But Sarah, he added, his tone cautionary, your reputation is tied to this now. If it doesn't deliver on its promises, it already has, she replied with quiet confidence, rising to leave. The rest is just announcement and application. As Sarah exited the administration building, she found Olivia waiting anxiously by the fountain in the central courtyard. The young woman was dressed in her best outfit, conservative but clearly not expensive, and was nervously reviewing note cards. Is everything okay? Olivia asked, instantly sensing Sarah's tension. Did the dean try to pull our support? Sarah shook her head, offering a reassuring smile. Just the usual institutional caution, nothing to worry about. She gently took the note cards from Olivia's hands. You don't need these. You know the mathematics better than almost anyone on the team. But I've never spoken at a press conference, Olivia confessed. What if I say something wrong? What if they ask me questions I can't answer? Then you'll say, that's an excellent question that requires further research, Sarah advised. But Olivia, remember why you're there. You're not just representing yourself or even the Institute. You're representing every young woman mathematician who needs to see someone like you being taken seriously. Olivia straightened slightly, drawing strength from Sarah's words. Like Emily was for me. Exactly. Now come on. We're meeting James and the Wright Technologies team in 30 minutes for final preparations. The venue for the press conference was neither Wright Technologies' sleek headquarters nor the Institute's academic halls, but rather a community center in the Mission District, a deliberate choice that Alex had insisted upon. If we're going to talk about transformation, he had explained, let's do it in a place that represents community change, not corporate or academic power. As the teams converged for final preparations, James found himself momentarily overwhelmed. Journalists were setting up equipment in the main room. Tech industry analysts huddled in corners, speculating about the announcement. Academic representatives maintained a professional distance, their skepticism almost palpable. Mr. Wilson? A young staff member appeared at his elbow. Mr. Wright asked if you could join him in the side office before we begin. James followed her through a maze of corridors to a small room where Alex stood alone, staring at a framed photograph on the wall, children planting a community garden. Transformation, Alex said without turning around, not just optimization. He finally faced James. I keep thinking about that distinction you made in the park. I've built a billion-dollar company focused on making existing systems more efficient, optimizing what already exists. But you and Emily, you were working on something fundamentally different. James nodded, understanding the weight of this realization. Emily used to say that optimization is about doing the same things better, but transformation is about doing better things. Smart woman, Alex replied with genuine admiration. James, before we go out there, I want you to know something. Whatever happens with the technology, whatever the market response or the academic reception, meeting you has transformed how I think about value, about potential, about what we miss when we only look where we expect to find brilliance. The sincerity in Alex's voice was unmistakable. This wasn't corporate posturing or pre-event platitudes. It was a moment of human connection between two men whose worlds had been entirely separate just days before. "I should be thanking you," James said quietly. "You could have walked past that tree in the park. Most people did, for years." Alex shook his head. "Don't thank me for basic human decency. Thank me when the Foundation has funded 100 Emily Wilsons whose ideas might otherwise never be heard." He checked his watch. 2 minutes, ready? James took a deep breath. "As I'll ever be." The press conference began with a technical explanation of the Wilson transformation networks, presented by Michael Roberts, with clarifying commentary from Sarah. Terms like recursive adaptivity and non-linear transformation pathways filled the air, accompanied by visualizations that demonstrated the algorithm's unprecedented efficiency. The technical press nodded appreciatively. This was clearly groundbreaking work. Then came the human story. Alex stepped forward, his usual polished corporate demeanor softened by genuine emotion as he recounted the rainy night in Dolores Park and the establishment of the Emily Wilson Foundation. There was an audible murmur when he announced that the foundation would receive 30% of all profits generated by the technology. A far cry from the 20% James had initially bargained for in the rain. But mathematics this transformative deserves more than financial recognition, Alex continued. It deserves proper academic acknowledgement and continued development, which is why I'm pleased to introduce the academic director of the Emily Wilson Advanced Mathematics Initiative at the Bay Area Institute of Technology, Dr. James Wilson. The room fell silent as James approached the podium. He had shed the tentative bearing of a man accustomed to being overlooked. In its place was a quiet dignity, a presence that commanded attention not through force, but through authenticity. 7 years ago, James began, his voice steady despite the emotion behind his words, my daughter Emily showed me an equation that she believed could change how we understand adaptive systems. I didn't fully grasp its importance then. By the time I did, she was gone. He paused, allowing the weight of those words to settle. I made her a promise that her work wouldn't be forgotten. That promise kept me going through circumstances I never imagined facing. He gestured toward the screen behind him, where Emily's original equations were displayed alongside the current implementation. This isn't just about an algorithm. It's about recognizing that brilliance doesn't always come in expected packages or follow traditional paths. It's about creating systems that can identify potential wherever it exists. James then introduced Olivia, explaining her connection to Emily's work and her critical role in the current implementation. As the young woman stepped forward, nervous but determined, an unexpected thing happened. Dr. Keller, the senior professor who had initially been so skeptical, was the first to applaud. Others quickly followed. Olivia spoke briefly but powerfully about what Emily Wilson's paper had meant to her as an undergraduate, and how working with James to complete his daughter's vision had reinforced her own commitment to mathematics. Some equations change how we calculate, she concluded. Others change how we see the world. The Wilson transformations do both. As the formal presentation concluded and the Q&A began, Richard Blackwell watched from the back of the room with a complicated expression. The board member had arrived late, slipping in just as Michael began the technical overview. Now, as journalists peppered the panel with questions about implementation timelines and market applications, Richard made his way to Alex's assistant. I need 5 minutes with him before he leaves, he murmured. The assistant nodded discreetly, making a note on her tablet. The questions continued, ranging from technically specific to broadly philosophical. When a technology reporter asked James whether his experience of homelessness had influenced his mathematical thinking, a momentary hush fell over the room, the question teetering on the edge of inappropriate voyeurism. James considered the question carefully. "Mathematics has always been a refuge," he said finally, "a place where truth is truth, regardless of circumstances. But yes, when you've lost everything external, you develop a different relationship with abstract concepts. You recognize patterns others might miss because patterns become more important than possessions." He smiled slightly. In that sense, extreme circumstances can create a clarity that comfort sometimes obscures. The reporter nodded thoughtfully, clearly receiving more insight than she had expected. The press conference continued for another 30 minutes before the communications team began wrapping up, directing further questions to the media relations contacts provided in the press packets. As attendees filed out, Richard finally approached Alex. "Quite a show," he said, his tone carefully neutral. Alex raised an eyebrow. "Not a show, Richard. A legitimate breakthrough." "I'm not questioning the technology," Richard clarified, surprising Alex. "The preliminary tests speak for themselves. I'm questioning the structure of this foundation arrangement. 30% is unprecedented." "So is the breakthrough," Alex replied calmly. "Besides, the board approved the term sheet yesterday." "With reservations," Richard countered. "Several members are concerned about the precedent this sets. What happens when the next brilliant homeless person shows up at your door?" Alex's expression hardened slightly. "Then I'll consider us fortunate to have found another overlooked genius." "Richard, what's really bothering you? That we're sharing the profits, or that this success challenges your assumptions about where innovation comes from?" Before Richard could respond, James approached, accompanied by Sarah and Olivia. The tension between Alex and Richard was immediately apparent. "Everything all right?" James asked, his newfound confidence allowing him to address even this uncomfortable moment directly. Richard turned, regarding James with an assessing gaze. "Mr. Wilson," he acknowledged with a slight nod. "Congratulations on your presentation. Very compelling narrative." "Thank you," James replied evenly, "though I find the mathematics more compelling than my personal story." A flicker of respect crossed Richard's face. This was not the response of a man seeking publicity or sympathy. Indeed, the technical applications are impressive, particularly the potential for financial modeling that Michael outlined. He hesitated, then added, "My firm specialized in algorithmic trading before I joined the Wright board. We would have paid handsomely for technology with half this capability." "Then perhaps you understand why it needs to be developed with ethical oversight," Sarah interjected smoothly. "The Emily Wilson Foundation isn't just about profit sharing. It's about ensuring that transformative technology benefits more than just those who can afford it." Richard's gaze shifted to Sarah, his expression calculating but not dismissive. "A noble sentiment, Dr. Chen, though historically difficult to implement in practice, which is precisely why we're structuring it differently from the start," Alex said firmly. "Richard, I understand your concerns from a traditional business perspective, but this isn't a traditional situation. Sometimes transformation requires breaking old patterns, not just in technology, but in how we value and distribute its benefits." The standoff between them was interrupted by Michael, who approached with an urgent expression. "Alex, we've got 4 major investment firms requesting immediate meetings. The market's reacting to the announcement. Our stock is up 23% and climbing." A slight smile tugged at Richard's lips. "It seems the market approves of your transformation, unconventional as it may be." He extended his hand to James. "Mr. Wilson, despite my reservations about certain structural aspects, I look forward to seeing where your daughter's work leads us. It's extraordinary." As Richard departed, James turned to Alex. "He doesn't trust me." "He doesn't trust change," Alex corrected, "but he respects results. And what we presented today is already generating results that even the most skeptical board member can't ignore." The next few hours dissolved into a whirlwind of follow-up interviews, congratulatory messages and planning sessions for the Foundation's formal launch. By early evening, the core team had relocated to Alex's downtown apartment, a penthouse with sweeping views of the city that somehow managed to feel comfortable rather than ostentatious. As the sun set over San Francisco, casting golden light across the bay, James found himself standing on the balcony, momentarily separated from the celebration inside. In his hand was Emily's photograph, a touchstone he still carried everywhere. "We did it, Em," he whispered. "They know your name now." Sarah joined him on the balcony, offering a glass of sparkling water. "Taking a breather?" James accepted, the drink with a grateful nod. "Processing. It's been a lot." "That's an understatement," Sarah agreed. "The academic journals are already requesting submissions. 3 universities have reached out about joint research initiatives, and the Institute's board has approved emergency funding for a dedicated computational lab for the Emily Wilson Initiative." James took this in silently, watching the city lights begin to twinkle into existence as darkness fell. "I keep waiting," he admitted. "For what? For it all to disappear, to wake up back in the park." He turned to face her, vulnerability visible beneath his composed exterior. For 7 years, Emily's mathematics was a private conversation between her memory and my persistence. Now it's becoming something else, something public, institutional. Part of me fears what happens when others reshape her work. Sarah considered this thoughtfully. "That's why you need to guide it," she said finally. "Academic director isn't just a title, James. It's a responsibility to ensure Emily's vision maintains its integrity while allowing it to grow beyond what even she might have imagined." Their conversation was interrupted by Olivia, who appeared at the balcony door with barely contained excitement. "Dr. Chen, James, you need to see this." They followed her inside, where Michael had connected his laptop to Alex's large wall display. On the screen was a visualization of the algorithm's performance across a simulation of interconnected neural networks, a cascade of transformation patterns spreading through previously rigid systems. "We just ran the full-scale integration and test," Michael explained, his usual professional restraint giving way to genuine awe. "The results are, well, see for yourself." The visualization showed not just increased efficiency, but emergent behaviors that none of them had explicitly programmed. The system was developing adaptive pathways that improved with each iteration in ways they hadn't predicted. "It's learning," James murmured, stepping closer to the screen. "Not just adapting to parameters we set. It's extending the transformation principles to scenarios we didn't specify." Alex, who had been quietly observing from across the room, joined them now. "Is that concerning or exciting?" "Both," James and Sarah replied simultaneously, then exchanged a quick smile at their synchronicity. "What I find most remarkable," Olivia added, her academic hesitancy now replaced by confident analysis, "is that it's preserving ethical constraints even while developing novel approaches. Look here." She pointed to a section of the visualization where the network had encountered a potential optimization that would have violated privacy parameters. It found an alternative pathway that maintained performance without compromising the boundary conditions. "That was Emily's core insight," James explained, his voice filled with pride. "She believed transformation shouldn't just be about capability, it should be about responsibility. Her algorithms were designed to recognize boundaries as essential, features, not limitations to overcome." As the team discussed implications and next steps, a new atmosphere settled over them. The shared excitement of pioneers who had glimpsed something revolutionary. For James, it was a bittersweet triumph. His daughter's vision was being realized more fully than he had dared to hope, yet she wasn't there to witness it. Later that night, after the others had departed, Alex found James still studying the visualization data, making notes in a journal remarkably similar to the one Emily had used. "You should rest," Alex suggested, setting down a fresh cup of coffee nonetheless. "Tomorrow's going to be another full day." James nodded without looking up. "I will, soon. There's something in these emergence patterns I want to understand first." Alex sat across from him, observing the man who had so dramatically altered the trajectory of his company and his own perspective. "You know, when I found you in the park, I thought I was discovering a solution to a technical problem," he said reflectively. "I never imagined I was encountering a solution to a human one." James looked up, questioning. "For years," Alex continued, "I've been building systems to make machines smarter, faster, more efficient, but I've been missing something fundamental about why we build technology in the first place." He gestured toward the journal, the visualization, the evidence of transformative thinking. "This isn't just about better algorithms, it's about better questions, better purposes." James smiled slightly. "Emily would agree with you. She used to argue with her professors about this constantly. They wanted her to focus on optimization benchmarks. How much faster? How much more efficient? She kept insisting that the real challenge wasn't speed, but direction." "Smart beyond her years," Alex mused. "James, I have a proposition for you, beyond what we've already established with the Foundation and the Institute initiative." "I'm listening." "I want to create a new division within Wright Technologies, separate from our commercial AI work. A skunkworks focused exclusively on human-centered transformation problems. Healthcare, climate modeling, educational accessibility, areas where the goal isn't market domination, but meaningful impact." Alex leaned forward, his expression earnest. "And I want you to lead it." James set down his pen, genuinely surprised. "I'm not a business leader, Alex. I'm a mathematician who spent the last 7 years living in parks and under bridges." "Exactly," Alex replied without hesitation. "You've experienced both extremes of our society, academic excellence and complete exclusion. You understand systems from the inside and the outside. That perspective, combined with your mathematical insight, is exactly what we need." The proposal hung between them, unexpected, challenging, potentially transformative in its own right. For James, it represented not just personal redemption, but a platform to ensure that Emily's approach to mathematics could impact real-world problems in ways she had only dreamed of. "I'll need to set conditions," James said finally. Alex nodded. "I'd expect nothing less. Complete academic transparency, open-source core algorithms, diverse hiring practices that look beyond traditional credentials." James's voice grew stronger with each point, "and a commitment that profit will never be the primary metric of success." Rather than pushback, Alex smiled. "Those aren't conditions, James. They're the foundation of transformation. Write them up and they'll be the charter for the new division." As their conversation continued into the night, outlining a vision that neither could have imagined a week earlier, San Francisco slept around them. A city of extreme wealth and extreme poverty, of technological innovation and human suffering, all coexisting in uneasy proximity. But within that contradictory landscape, something new was taking shape. A collaboration born of chance, sustained by mathematics, and now expanding into possibilities that honored both Emily's brilliance and her father's persistence. The following morning brought a new challenge, one neither James nor Alex had anticipated. As James returned to his hotel after an early meeting at the Institute, the front desk attendant stopped him. "Mr. Wilson, there's someone waiting for you in the lobby." James followed her gesture to a seating area where a middle-aged woman sat rigidly, clutching a handbag in her lap. He recognized her instantly, despite the 7 years since they had last spoken. "Diane," he said quietly, approaching his former wife. She looked up, her expression a complex mixture of emotions: anger, concern, confusion. "I saw you on the news," she said without preamble. "After all this time, I find out you're alive by watching technology reports." James sat beside her, maintaining a respectful distance. "I'm sorry. I should have reached out when things started changing." "You should have reached out 7 years ago," she corrected, her voice tight with restrained emotion. "Instead, you disappeared. After the funeral, after everything, you just vanished, James. I thought you might be dead." The weight of his choices settled heavily on James's shoulders. In his single-minded focus on completing Emily's work, he had cut off everyone from his previous life, including the woman who had shared his grief. "I couldn't face anyone," he admitted, "especially you. I failed her, Diane. I was so caught up in my own research that I didn't see what she was developing until it was too late. If I had paid more attention, gotten her the right academic support earlier—" "Stop," Diane interrupted. "Emily made her own choices. She always did." Her expression softened slightly. "She was exactly like you that way, determined, independent, brilliant." She hesitated, then added more gently, "I didn't come here to blame you, James. I came because I needed to see for myself that it was really you, that you were okay." James nodded, understanding the complex motivations behind her. "Appearance. I wasn't okay, not for a long time, but now I think I might be getting there." Diane studied him carefully, noting the changes that went beyond his now clean appearance and new clothes. There was a purpose in his bearing that had been absent in those dark days after Emily's death, a clarity that spoke of renewed direction. "This mathematics they're talking about," she said. "It's really hers? Emily's work?" "Yes," James confirmed. "The core concepts, the fundamental approach, it all came from her final research. I just finished what she started." A tear slipped down Diane's cheek, quickly wiped away. She would have loved that, knowing her work mattered. She reached into her handbag and removed a small velvet pouch. "I brought something. I thought you should have it now." James accepted the pouch, opening it carefully. Inside was Emily's graduation ring from her undergraduate days, a simple band with the university crest and her graduation year. "She was wearing it that day," Diane explained quietly. "They gave it to me with her personal effects. I've kept it all this time, but now I think it belongs with her work." The simple gesture, this physical connection to Emily, affected James more deeply than the press conference, the foundation, all the external validation combined. This was personal, intimate, a bridge between the father he had been and the man he was becoming. "Thank you," he managed, his voice thick with emotion. They sat in silence for a moment, two people connected by loss, separated by time, now tentatively finding a new way to honor what had mattered to them both. "Will you stay in San Francisco?" Diane finally asked. James nodded. "For now. The institute position is here and the foundation work." "Good," she said simply. Maybe we could have coffee sometime. You could tell me more about what she was working on. In terms I might understand." "I'd like that," James replied, genuine warmth in his voice. "Emily always said I needed to practice explaining complex ideas in simpler ways." A small smile touched Diane's lips, the first hint of the woman James had once known. She was right about that, about a lot of things. As Diane left, promising to call in a few days, James remained seated, Emily's ring held carefully in his palm. The weight of it was insignificant compared to the symbolic heft it carried, a tangible reminder that transformation wasn't just mathematical. It was deeply, profoundly human. 3 months after the press conference, the Emily Wilson Advanced Mathematics Initiative had taken shape with remarkable speed. What had once been dusty storage space in the mathematics building was now a state-of-the-art research center, its glass walls adorned with Emily's equations, rendered in elegant script. Inside, a diverse team of mathematicians, computer scientists, and domain experts worked in collaborative clusters, many of whom had been specifically recruited for their unconventional backgrounds or approaches. James's office, a concept that still occasionally startled him, overlooked the main research floor. He had insisted on transparency, both literally and figuratively, refusing the traditional academic trappings of closed doors and hierarchical spaces. Today, he stood at the window, watching Olivia lead a discussion with 3 senior professors and a high school student whose amateur mathematics blog had caught the initiative's attention. "They're debating the healthcare applications," Sarah explained, joining him at the window. Olivia's idea about using the transformation models for personalized treatment protocols is gaining traction. James nodded, pride evident in his expression. "She's found her voice." "Thanks in large part to you," Sarah pointed out. "Your insistence that we evaluate ideas on merit rather than source has created a culture where even first-year students feel empowered to challenge conventional thinking." Before James could respond, his phone vibrated with a message from Alex. "Need you at WT headquarters. Board presentation in 30 minutes, car waiting downstairs." Duty calls," James said, showing Sarah the message. "The quarterly review for the Wright Technologies board." Sarah's expression turned sympathetic. "Richard still giving you trouble?" "Less than before," James admitted, gathering his tablet. And the small leather notebook he now carried, a gift from Diane during their 3rd coffee meeting. He's moved from outright skepticism to cautious respect. Progress, I suppose. The sleek, autonomous vehicle that waited outside the Institute was emblematic of James's new reality. Doors that opened automatically, systems that recognized him, a world that suddenly acknowledged his presence after years of invisibility. As the car navigated the afternoon traffic, James reviewed his presentation notes, focusing on the metrics that would matter most to the business-minded board. Implementation successes, efficiency gains, and emerging market applications. What he deliberately did not emphasize was what mattered most to him: the transformation team's work with non-profit healthcare initiatives, educational access projects, and community development programs that operationalized Emily's mathematical principles in service of human needs rather than profit margins. Wright Technologies headquarters rose like a gleaming spire in the downtown business district, its curved glass exterior reflecting clouds and blue sky. Inside, the executive floor hummed with purposeful activity. Alex met James at the elevator, looking uncharacteristically tense. "Something's up with Richard," he warned in a low voice as they walked briskly toward the boardroom. "He requested financial projections for the transformation division that weren't part of our planned presentation. His analysts have been running numbers all morning." James absorbed this information without breaking stride. "Should I be concerned?" "Not necessarily," Alex replied, "but be prepared for pointed questions about resource allocation and return on investment. The commercial applications are proving so successful that there's pressure to prioritize them over the social impact initiatives." This tension had been simmering since the division's inception, the pull between profit-driven applications that pleased shareholders and purpose-driven projects that fulfilled the ethical vision James had established as a condition of his involvement. So far, Alex had successfully balanced both priorities, but James had always known this equilibrium would face challenges. The boardroom fell silent as they entered. 8 people sat around the polished mahogany table, each with identical leather, portfolios and crystal water glasses before them. Richard Blackwell occupied the seat directly opposite the presentation screen, his posture subtly commanding despite not being the board chair. "Mr. Wilson," he acknowledged with a nod that was neither warm nor cold. "We're looking forward to your quarterly update." James took his position at the head of the table, suddenly acutely aware of the contrast between this environment and where he had been just months ago. The irony wasn't lost on him. He who had once been invisible to such people now commanded their complete attention. "Thank you for the opportunity," James began, activating the display with a gesture. "The Wilson Transformation Division has exceeded projected benchmarks across all major implementation categories this quarter." He proceeded with a methodical overview of the division's progress, the successful integration of the transformation, algorithms into Wright Technology's primary AI frameworks, the efficiency gains in data processing, the adaptation of the models for specialized industry applications. The board members nodded appreciatively as graphs displayed impressive upward trajectories. Only when James transitioned to the social impact initiatives did he notice a subtle shift in the room's energy. Slight glances exchanged, a pen tapped against a portfolio edge. "The community healthcare pilot has demonstrated particularly promising results," James continued, undeterred. "Early data shows a 47% improvement in treatment optimization when the transformation models are applied to personalized medicine protocols. 6 hospitals in underserved areas are now implementing—" "James," Richard interrupted smoothly, "these community programs are certainly admirable, but I'd like to direct your attention to the financial projections my team has prepared." With a gesture, Richard activated a secondary display showing a very different set of graphs, one comparing resource allocation between commercial and social impact applications, with a clear emphasis on the latter's lower profit potential. "As you can see," Richard continued, "we're allocating approximately 38% of the division's resources to initiatives that generate less than 12% of its revenue. From a fiduciary perspective, this raises obvious concerns." Alex straightened in his chair. "Richard, we've been very clear from the beginning that the Transformation Division operates under a different set of success metrics than our traditional product lines." "Indeed," Richard acknowledged, "and that arrangement was acceptable during the proof of concept phase. But now that we've confirmed the commercial viability, indeed the exceptional market potential of these algorithms, we need to consider a more strategic deployment of resources." James felt a familiar tension, the same resistance he had encountered throughout his academic career, the same dismissal of values that couldn't be quantified in financial terms. But where once he might have retreated into mathematical abstraction, now he understood exactly what was at stake. "If I may," he said, his voice quiet but firm, "I'd like to share something that wasn't included in the formal presentation." He pulled up a new display, not charts or projections, but photographs. A community health clinic in Oakland where the transformation algorithms had reduced diagnostic errors by 60%. A rural school where adaptive learning systems built on Emily's models had dramatically improved educational outcomes for students with learning differences. A disaster response coordination system that had saved lives during recent flooding in the Central Valley. "These applications generate less revenue," James acknowledged, "but they create more value. And they fulfill the explicit purpose for which my daughter developed these mathematical principles in the first place, to transform systems for human benefit, not merely to optimize them for profit." He turned to face Richard directly. "The division agreement specifies that these social impact applications will remain core to our mission. That was non-negotiable then, and it remains non-negotiable now." A tense silence filled the room. The board chair glanced nervously between James and Richard, clearly unsure how to navigate this standoff between principle and pragmatism. To everyone's surprise, it was Richard who finally broke the tension with an unexpected question. What would scaling these social impact initiatives require? James blinked, momentarily thrown by the pivot. I'm not sure I understand. If these applications truly deliver the value you're describing, Richard clarified, then perhaps the issue isn't that we're allocating too many resources to them. Perhaps we're thinking too small about their potential. Reach, he turned to Alex. What would it take to double or triple the impact of these programs while developing a sustainable financial model? Not everything valuable needs to be charitable. Alex exchanged a surprised glance with James before responding. We've actually been exploring partnership models with healthcare systems and educational institutions, structures that would allow for broader implementation while generating enough revenue to sustain ongoing development. Richard nodded thoughtfully. That's the conversation we should be having. Not how to limit these applications to prioritize commercial gain, but how to scale their impact in ways that create both social and financial sustainability. He closed his portfolio with a decisive motion. Mr. Wilson, I owe you an apology. The room fell silent again, but with a very different quality than before. When you first presented Emily's work, Richard continued, I saw it primarily as a technological asset to be monetized. I was wrong. What your daughter created, what you completed, isn't just a better algorithm. It's a better approach to how systems serve human needs. He gestured to the photographs still displayed on screen, and the evidence speaks for itself. James studied Richard carefully, searching for the calculation behind this apparent conversion. But what he saw instead was something more genuine, the rare but transformative moment when a person's perspective fundamentally shifts. No apology necessary, James replied simply. Emily's work challenges conventional thinking. It's supposed to. The remainder of the meeting took an unexpected turn, evolving from a defensive justification of resource allocation into a strategic discussion of how to amplify the social impact initiatives while ensuring their sustainability. By the time the board adjourned, a new directive had been established, the creation of an Emily Wilson Social Innovation Fund that would specifically accelerate the non-commercial applications of the transformation algorithms, with Richard himself as the first major investor. As the board members filed out, Richard lingered, waiting until he and James were alone in the room. There's something else you should know, he said, an uncharacteristic hesitation in his manner. My daughter was diagnosed with the same rare condition that affected Emily. Different outcome, thankfully, but I understand now why this matters to you beyond the mathematics. The revelation landed like a physical weight. James had never publicly discussed the specifics of Emily's medical condition, the rare cardiac anomaly that had ultimately caused her death. That Richard had researched this personal detail spoke to a level of investment beyond professional interest. I'm sorry, James said quietly. She's 22, thriving now after 3 surgeries. Richard's usual polished veneer slipped, revealing a father's vulnerability beneath the businessman's exterior. When I saw the cardiac application of the transformation algorithms in your social impact report, I had my medical team review it. They believe it could significantly improve diagnostic accuracy for cases like hers. James understood then that transformation worked in multiple dimensions, not just in mathematics or technology, but in human connection. What had begun as professional skepticism had evolved into personal investment through an unexpected point of common ground. Emily would be pleased, James said simply. That was always her highest hope for the work, that it would help where help was most needed. As James left Wright Technologies headquarters that afternoon, he found himself walking rather than taking the waiting car. He needed the space, the movement, the city around him to process the day's unexpected developments. His path took him, perhaps subconsciously, toward Dolores Park, the place where everything had changed on that rainy night months ago. The park was alive with activity now, families on blankets, musicians under trees, the everyday vibrancy of a community space in good weather. James found an empty bench and sat, watching people move through their lives, visible to each other in ways he had not been visible for so long. His phone buzzed with a message from Olivia. Big breakthrough on the educational application. When you're back, come to Lab 3, bringing in pizza for the team tonight. James smiled, recalling the shy graduate student who had once been too intimidated to speak in meetings. Now she led a research team, her confidence growing alongside her mathematical contributions. He typed back a quick confirmation, then noticed another message that had arrived during the board meeting, this one from Diane. Coffee tomorrow? Have Emily's research journals from undergrad. Found them in storage. Thought you might want them for the initiative archives. Another connection, another bridge being rebuilt. James confirmed that meeting as well, feeling a sense of integration that had been absent for so many years, the compartmentalized pieces of his life slowly being reassembled into something new. As he sat contemplating these developments, a young man approached the bench hesitantly. He was perhaps 20, wearing clothes that had seen better days, clutching a worn backpack to his chest. "Excuse me," he said, his voice barely audible, above the park's ambient noise. Are you Dr. Wilson from the Mathematics Initiative?" James nodded, studying the young man with interest. "I am. I saw the article about you, about how you were." He gestured vaguely, clearly uncomfortable with naming James's former homelessness directly. "And about the foundation, about giving people chances." James waited patiently, recognizing the anxiety of someone gathering courage to cross a threshold. "I was in community college," the young man continued. "Engineering. Had to drop out when my mom got sick. I've been trying to keep studying on my own, but..." He unzipped his backpack with trembling hands and removed a notebook filled with dense calculations. "I've been working on something. Probably nothing important, but I thought maybe." James accepted the notebook, opening it to find page after page of careful work, equations, diagrams, notes written in margins and on scraps of paper inserted between pages. The mathematical notation was sometimes unconventional, but the thinking behind it showed remarkable intuition. "What's your name?" James asked. "Marcus," the young man replied. "Marcus Chen." "Well, Marcus Chen," James said, closing the notebook and returning it with care. "The initiative has an open session every Thursday evening, specifically for people working outside traditional academic structures. I think you should bring this there." He pulled out a card, still a novelty to have his own, and wrote a note on the back. "Give this to Olivia Martinez. Tell her I said your work deserves review." Marcus stared at the card as if it were made of gold. "Just like that? You haven't even really looked at it." "I've seen enough to recognize potential," James replied. "And I've learned that potential appears in unexpected places." He stood, extending his hand. "The initiative exists precisely so that good ideas aren't lost because of life circumstances. Emily would have insisted on that." As they shook hands, James felt the completion of a circle. From being the man overlooked beneath a tree to being the one who could ensure others weren't overlooked in turn. Not because he now had power or position, but because he remembered what it meant to be invisible. 6 months later, the Emily Wilson Advanced Mathematics Initiative hosted its first international conference. Mathematicians, computer scientists, and domain experts from around the world gathered to discuss applications of the transformation principles across disciplines ranging from climate modeling to economic systems. The main auditorium was filled to capacity as James prepared to deliver the keynote address. In the front row sat Alex, Sarah, and Olivia. Beside them was Diane, who had become an unexpected advocate for the initiative's educational outreach programs. Richard Blackwell was there too, his daughter beside him, a young woman whose medical experience had inspired a new research track focused specifically on cardiac diagnostic systems. And in the row behind them sat 5 individuals who might have seemed out of place in an academic conference. Marcus Chen, now a research assistant working with Olivia, 2 former homeless veterans who had been recruited for their unique perspectives on systems thinking, a high school dropout whose self-taught algorithmic innovations had earned her a special fellowship, and a retired nurse whose observations about patient care patterns had led to a breakthrough in the healthcare applications. As James stepped to the podium, he carried Emily's graduation ring in his pocket, a tactile reminder of why all of this mattered. On the screen behind him was not just Emily's photograph, but images of communities, schools, hospitals, and disaster response teams where her mathematical principles were now creating tangible change. Transformation, James began, is not just about making systems more efficient. It's about reimagining what systems are for. He looked out at the diverse audience before him. People who would have been unlikely colleagues in traditional academic or corporate environments. Emily understood something fundamental, that mathematics isn't just abstract theory, it's a toolkit for reshaping reality. He touched his pocket, feeling the small circle of metal that connected past to present. But she also understood that the most important variable in any equation is human potential, especially the potential that exists at the margins, in the overlooked spaces, in the minds that think differently. As James continued his address, outlining the initiative's progress and future directions, he felt neither pride nor vindication, only a profound sense of purpose fulfilled. Emily's work had not only transformed mathematical approaches to complex systems, it had transformed lives, beginning with his own. The algorithms she had conceived were now helping doctors diagnose rare conditions earlier, helping communities allocate limited resources more effectively, helping students learn in ways tailored to their unique needs. But perhaps more importantly, the story behind those algorithms, the persistence of a father, the vision of a daughter, the chance encounter on a rainy night, had transformed how people understood the nature of brilliance itself. After the keynote, as attendees mingled in the reception area, Alex found James standing somewhat apart, observing the animated conversations around them. "Quite a different scene from Dolores Park," Alex remarked. James smiled. "Different, yet connected. That's what matters." He nodded toward Marcus, who was enthusiastically explaining his work to a group of senior mathematicians. Every one of these connections represents a transformation that might never have happened. Alex considered this, then asked a question. He'd been pondering for months. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I'd taken a different route home that night? If it hadn't been raining, if you hadn't been working on that particular equation at that precise moment?" "Sometimes," James admitted. "But then I remember what Emily always said about complex systems. The most important patterns emerge not from single events, but from multiple interactions over time." He turned to face Alex directly. "Perhaps it wasn't chance at all. Perhaps it was mathematical inevitability." Alex laughed. "I'm not sure I'm ready to attribute our meeting to mathematical destiny." "No? Consider the variables. A persistent problem your team couldn't solve, aligned with a solution I'd been refining for years, occurring in a location where our paths could intersect, during weather conditions that made your usual route less appealing." James's eyes held a hint of mischief. Sounds like a transformation algorithm to me. Before Alex could respond, Olivia approached with an excited expression. James, the team from Lagos wants to discuss implementing the healthcare model across their rural clinic network. And Dr. Patel has some fascinating insights about applying the transformations to water resource management. As James excused himself to join these discussions, Alex watched him move through the crowd, confident now, purposeful, so different from the man he had encountered in the park, yet in the most essential ways, unchanged, still driven by the same commitment to completing his daughter's legacy, still guided by the same ethical vision, still recognizing potential where others might not think to look. The true transformation, Alex reflected, wasn't in the mathematics or the algorithms or even the applications, remarkable as they all were. It was in the restoration of connection, the invisible threads that bound people to purpose, knowledge to need, past to future. Outside the conference center, San Francisco continued its perpetual motion, a city of extremes where genius and hardship often coexisted without acknowledgement. But inside, a new pattern was forming, one that had begun with a billionaire walking, past a homeless man solving mathematics in the rain, and now extended outward in ever-widening circles of possibility. A year ago, I was invisible, James said quietly. Not just homeless, unseen. Emily's mathematics was locked in my memory, unable to reach the world. You were building technology that optimized systems without transforming them. He smiled slightly. And now look at us. Alex watched a group of children race through an interactive display that translated their movements into mathematical patterns projected on the walls around them. Emily's equations transformed into light and color and joy. The real genius of Emily's work, James continued, wasn't just in the algorithms she developed. It was in understanding that true transformation requires us to question what we value and why, to recognize brilliance in unexpected forms, to see beyond immediate utility to deeper possibility. As the sun began to set over San Francisco, casting golden light across the city that had once been so indifferent to James's presence, the two men, a billionaire and a former homeless mathematician, stood shoulder to shoulder, not as savior and saved, but as collaborators in a transformation that had extended far beyond either of their original visions. Emily would have loved this, James said, watching the gathering below. Not the building with her name on it, but this people connecting, learning, discovering new possibilities together. She still does love it, Alex replied with gentle certainty. Through you, through her mathematics, through every life transformed by what the two of you created. James closed his fingers around Emily's ring, feeling its familiar weight. But where once it had represented loss and failure, it now embodied continuity and purpose. A circle unbroken, a pattern completed. The most beautiful equation, he said softly, is the one that connects us all. As darkness fell and lights illuminated the center from within, James Wilson, once invisible, now integral, rejoined the celebration below. Not as someone who had been rescued, but as someone who had been recognized. And in that recognition, a transformation far more profound than any algorithm had found its most perfect expression. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them.